Thank you for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill. Hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, share this video, help support a brother as I bring the news about African and Black travelers across the world. Today, I want to talk about a story that really disturbed me. It's about Black Africans who are fleeing the war in Ukraine, being held in detention centers in Poland and Estonia, and maybe other locations that we're unaware of as of now. I know at the beginning of the Ukraine crisis, there was a lot of news reports and disturbing images that we saw of the racism in effect as Black people tried to flee the war. But as the war has continued, these stories have died down. But as we know, when the story disappears in the media, that doesn't mean that we disappear. And so we need to make sure that the pressure is always there to report on what's happening to our people abroad. So let's begin. This is from The Independent. It reads, non-white refugees fleeing Ukraine detained in EU immigration facilities. Investigation. African students fleeing Vladimir Putin's invasion disappearing into detention centers. Written by Bulman, Nadine White, published on Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022. All right, so non-white students who have fled Ukraine have been detained by EU border authorities in what has been condemned as clearly discriminatory and not acceptable. An investigation by The Independent in partnership with Lighthouse Reports and other media partners reveals that Ukraine residents of African origin who have crossed the border to escape the war have been placed in closed facilities, with some having been there for a number of weeks. I would like anybody to find any other group of people who have fled this war and are being treated the way that Black people have. Please, if you are in the comments, prove me wrong, because all we're seeing here on my end is Black people getting discriminated against as we are fleeing this war. We have not heard about any other group of people beside the Gypsies, and I hate using that term, or the Romani, who are stateless people somewhat because a lot of countries in Eastern Europe refuse to give them citizenship. A lot of these people that we're hearing about being discriminated against leaving this country are Africans, dark-skinned Indians, and the Romani. Other than that, I cannot think of any other group of people who are facing such treatment. Now they're putting Black people in detention centers. How sick. How sick. At least 4 students who have fled Vladimir Putin's invasion are being held in a long-term holding facility, Lesznowola, a village 40 kilometers from the Polish capital, Warsaw, with little means of communication with the outside world and no legal advice. One of the students said they were stopped by the officials as they crossed the border and were given no choice but to sign a document they did not understand before they were taken to the camp. They do not know how long they will be held there. This is horrible. They're being treated like criminals when they're obviously fleeing a war. And as we will read later, these people in Poland are breaking their own laws. A Nigerian man currently detained said he was scared about what will happen to him after being held in the facility for more than 3 weeks. How traumatizing. Not only are you a refugee in war, but now you're held in a foreign country in a detention center like a criminal. I mean, when these people are released, the Polish government should be forced to compensate these people for their time and also help pay for their medical or mental re-evaluation or care, because these people will have PTSD after this. Polish border police have confirmed that 52 third country nationals who have fled Ukraine are currently being held in detention facilities in Poland. 52 people held in detention facilities, plus more that we maybe don't know about, for a crime they did not commit. Just for fleeing a war and just for being born Black, they are being treated like this. The International Organization for Migration, IOM, said they were aware of 3 other facilities in Poland where people, non-Ukrainians, who have fled the war are being detained. Separately, a Nigerian student who fled the Russian invasion is understood to have been detained in Estonia after traveling to the country to join relatives and is now being threatened with deportation. This is horrible. And I think this once again shows the hypocrisy of Europe. For many years, people have thought that Europe is the land of enlightenment, humanitarian ideals, and where people can be treated like human beings. But if the last few years of African refugees dying in the Mediterranean did not show you, if Syrian refugees being told that they are not welcome in Europe, if all the Afghans who have been fleeing a war caused by the West and they were not accepted into the EU did not show you, and how they immediately opened the gates for Ukrainians, and all these racist images that we're seeing about people wanting to have blonde hair, blue-eyed people in their country. If all of this did not show you, and it's right in front of your face, the hypocrisy of Europe, the white supremacy of Europe, then nothing will, and you are being willfully ignorant. This is so back to the article. This is despite a EU protection directive dated March 4th, which states that third country nationals studying or working in Ukraine should be admitted to the EU temporarily on humanitarian grounds. Maria Arena, chair of the EU Parliament Subcommittee on Human Rights, said international students in Ukraine, as well as Ukrainians, are at risk and risking their lives in the country. Detention, deportation, or any other measure that does not grant them protection is not acceptable. So according to the EU's own directive, issued earlier last month, they should be accepting non-Ukrainians into the EU. So, for anybody in the comments who wants to say, well, they're not Ukrainian, so they can't be expected to be treated the same as in Europe, the EU's own rules has said that people from different countries who were in Ukraine should be allowed the same rights as the refugees from Ukraine. So I don't want to hear any of this stuff, well, it's not about race. It is absolutely about race because it's arbitrary. It's arbitrary how they are detaining these young black men and black boys. And all of these people should be immediately released, and they should be immediately compensated for every single minute that they were held in jail. This is unacceptable and it's sick. The findings of the investigation, which was carried out in collaboration with Lighthouse Reports, Spiegel, Mediapart, and Radio France, comes after it emerged that scores of Black and Asian refugees fleeing Ukraine were experiencing racial discrimination while trying to make border crossing last month. We did not hear these stories about any other group of refugees except the darker people of the earth. They took us here to the camp. I'm scared. Gabriel, 29, had been studying trade and economics in Kharkov before the war broke out. The Nigerian national left the city and arrived at the border on February 27th, where he says his phone was confiscated by the Polish border guards and he was given no option but to sign a form he did not understand. This is insane. Why would you confiscate somebody's phone when they're fleeing a war? They obviously need to communicate with family, talk to their embassy. How is this person going to get to where they need to go, to a safe place out of your custody, if you're confiscating their phones? It was written in Polish. I didn't know what I was signing, I said. I wouldn't sign, but they insisted I signed it, and that if not, I would go to jail for 5 months, he said in a recorded conversation with a Nigerian activist. The student said he was then taken to court where there was no interpreter to translate what was being said so that he could understand, and then taken to a detention center in the small village of Lesznowola. It is a closed camp inside a forest, said Gabriel, speaking from the facility. There's no freedom. Some people have been here more than 9 months. Some have gone mad. I'm scared. So if some have been held here for more than 9 months, that means obviously this was before the war in Ukraine. And some of these people here were refugees fleeing other conflicts, or people who are migrants for any other reason. And some people will try to say there's a difference between economic migrants and refugees. Because of this global world of capitalism and the history of white supremacy, the poorer places of the earth are poor because of the injustice that was done upon these people many years ago. So these people have as much a right to migrate to the places that have stolen the capital and the wealth of the lands where they come from, such as Africa, Central Asia, Latin America. All these people have the right to move to Europe if they want to, because the wealth of their nations was stolen by European countries. So yes, a refugee coming from Syria and some guy from Cameroon who just doesn't have a job there, these people both have the same rights to the wealth of this planet, because the wealth of this planet is being hoarded and stolen by people of European descent through the history of colonialism and racism on this planet. Either way, as we can see, Gabriel in this story is a refugee of war, and they are putting this black man in the same category as people who they deem are, unwelcome, asylum seekers, refugees in Europe. Compare this to any other Ukrainian who has fled the war. We have not heard one story about a white Ukrainian being treated this way, or any other white person who was in Ukraine being treated the way that black Africans are and darker skinned people are. I shall continue reading. We escaped Ukraine, very horrible experience, the biggest risk of my life. Everything was scary. I thought that was the end of it, and now we are in detention. Gabriel said there are at least 2 other Nigerian students in the camp, along with students from Cameroon, Ghana, the Ivory Coast, and French African nations. Guards at the center said inmates have their mobile phones confiscated, with only those who have a second SIM card given a phone without a camera. Why don't they want to have cameras there? Why can't they show the conditions of these places? If this is just a detention center and they're not being charged with any crime, the only crime that they had was being black and wanting to be safe, why can't they show? Why can't they show what's happening? And I want you people to imagine a room full of young men whose only dream it is to study. They're not in Europe to rob, steal, rape, murder, kill people, hurt anybody. They're not terrorists. These people just want to probably get an education, return to their country, or do whatever they want with their lives. But instead, you're detaining these young men. And the problem is Europeans don't see black people as men and women. They don't see us as people because obviously they're treating us like animals. Many can only communicate with the outside world via email, and even this is said to be limited to certain times. Another individual detained at the center is Paul, 20, a Cameroonian who had been studying management and language at Agrarian University Bila Sarkeva in Kiev for 6 months when the war started. His brother, Victor, who is in Cameroon, said Paul had told him that he had been apprehended while crossing the border and that on March 2nd, a Polish judge ordered that he be transferred to Lesznowola detention center. His explanation, the camp doesn't seem like one that welcomes people fleeing from the war in Ukraine. It's a camp that has been existing and has people that came to seek for asylum. No one knows why he is being detained, he said. Victor said that Paul was given 7 days to appeal the decision to detain him, but that he has been unable to access the internet in order to file the appeal in time. So these people are being trapped in this situation. They're being told, hey, you can fight this case and say that you're not a refugee, but meanwhile, we're going to take your phone, block access to the internet from you, and now you have no ability to, actually fight whatever wrong we are committing upon you. Since that day he filed the appeal, police and guards tried to restrict them. He used to get 5 minutes of internet, but on that day they stopped letting them use the internet. The phone he used to communicate with me with was blocked. Maybe it's because they realized that the issue was taking on a legal dimension, he said. He's not allowed to be in Estonia. The investigation has also heard reports that a Nigerian student, Ruben, is facing deportation from Estonia after being detained having fled the war in Ukraine. Prior to his arrival in the Eastern European country, 32-year-old Ruben emailed the head of International House, a service center that helps internationals in Estonia, to communicate with the state, explaining that he wanted to join his cousin living in the country. The head of the organization, Leonardo Ortega, responded by letter that he may relocate to Estonia. Ruben, who attended Bila Sarkeva National Agrarian University in Ukraine and is married to a Ukrainian woman, arrived on March 9th through Poland with his cousin Peter. After being delayed for 3 hours at the Estonian border, the pair were escorted to a police station, according to Peter, 30, who has an Estonian residency permit. So this person is being told that he can enter Estonia. In this case, we're switching from Poland to Estonia. He's seeking asylum. Estonia is in the Schengen region. It's in the EU, so they're following the same directive as listed before about welcoming people fleeing. And not only that, he has somebody there in Estonia that he could vouch for. I know a lot of times when you are traveling to different countries and you want to have permanent residency, they want you to have somebody there that can sponsor you, vouch for you, make sure that you have money in your pocket and that you're not breaking the law. He has somebody there and they're still treating him like a criminal in Estonia. He said 3 police officers escorted his cousin away with his luggage and said he will be detained for 2 days, then deported back to Nigeria. The officers reportedly advised that the 32-year-old would be banned from entering any Schengen country for the next 5 years. His phone was confiscated, and he's been in detention since. This is wrong. This is so wrong how they're treating this man. A few officers said he's not allowed to be in Estonia. Even after asking for international protection, we were told that my cousin needed to have a lawyer to fight his case. But most of the lawyers I initially contacted refused to take my cousin's case, said Peter. He received an email in advance saying it was okay to come, and after everything we went through, the next thing they want to deport and ban him for 5 years. I don't know why deportation came into the picture. This is an example of a person who does everything right, goes above and beyond doing what's right, and still gets treated like a criminal just because of his nationality, his country of origin, and what he looks like. Criney, a London-based campaigner who has been supporting the affected students on a voluntary basis, said there was an emerging pattern of arbitrary detention of students coming out of Ukraine fleeing the war. There are other cases in Austria and Germany with regards to students who have applied for asylum or asked for permits to remain, the campaigner said, detained for the purpose of identity verification. The EU directive on March 4th aims to help refugees fleeing the invasion to stay for at least 1 year in one country and also have access to the labor market and education. So the directive says that anybody who's leaving Ukraine can work in the EU, be in the EU for 1 year, and be safe and not be held in detention centers. But the hypocrisy of Europe shows its face regardless. It states that it also applies to nationals of third countries other than Ukraine residing legally in Ukraine who are unable to return in safe and durable conditions to their country or region of origin. This can include third country nationals who are studying or working in Ukraine, it states, adding that this cohort should, in any event, be admitted into the Union on humanitarian grounds, without requiring valid travel documents to ensure safe passage with a view to returning to their country or region of origin. Michael Dworczyk, a top aide to the Polish prime minister, said when war broke out that everyone escaping the war will be received in Poland, including people without passports. But the Polish government has admitted that it is sending some of this cohort to closed facilities once they cross the border. In a tweet on March 2nd, the Polish Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration said, Ukrainians are fleeing the war. People of other nationalities are also fleeing. All those who do not have documents and cannot prove Ukrainian citizenship are carefully checked. If there is a need, they go to closed detention centers. But what is the need? Unless these people are bringing drugs or weapons or bombs across the border, what is the need to put any of these people in detention centers, regardless of their national origin, if they're fleeing Ukraine? And I want to say that we always have to look past what the people at the top are saying, because the people at the top of government will always give these platitudes, such as we stand against discrimination, everyone is welcome. Instances of racism and discrimination at our borders are disturbing, but all of that is just talk. We need action. We need these detention centers closed, the people let out, and for the EU to follow its own rules and accept these people on humanitarian grounds. In a letter to a member of the EU Parliament, Poland's border police admitted that 52 third country nationals who have fled from Ukraine had been taken to closed detention centers in the first 3 weeks of the war. For no reason. No reason. This document is written in Polish. Letter from Polish border police confirming people were detained just for entering Poland. This letter stated that this was necessary to carry out administrative proceedings for granting international protection or issuing a decision on obliging a foreigner to return. Ryan Schroeder, press officer at the IOM, said the organization was aware of 3 other facilities in Poland where third country nationals arriving from Ukraine who lack proper travel documentation are brought to for the purpose of identity verification. The Polish government, the Polish police, and the Estonian authorities declined to comment on the allegations. A spokesperson for the Polish border force said it couldn't give any details about the procedures on foreigners because of the protection on personal data. Protection on personal data as you confiscate their phones and take away any identity they have. adding that it is the court which takes the decision each time to place people in guarded centers for foreigners. Clearly unsatisfactory and discriminatory. Steve Pearce, a professor of EU law in the UK, says that even if member states choose not to apply temporary protection to legal residents of Ukraine, they should give them simplified entry, humanitarian support, and safe passage to their country of origin. He says, in my view, this is obviously a case where students could not have applied for a visa and might not meet the other usual criteria to cross the external borders. Yet there are overwhelming reasons to let them cross the borders anyway on humanitarian grounds. There are no good grounds for immigration detention in the circumstances, he added. Pause. I want to pause right here. I am all for countries protecting their sovereignty, having their own immigration policy, and letting in whoever they want, whenever they want. But at the same time, the EU applauds itself and pats itself on the back and spreads this image to the entire world that they are the bastion of humanity and civilization. But time and time again, they have showed us when these people who want to enter the EU or be in the EU are not white, and make no mistake about it, white. I'm not talking about any other ethnic group or anything like that. When these people are not white and they want to enter the EU, they get treated like shit. Point blank, period. The EU arbitrarily chooses to enforce and follow their own rules when it comes to immigration, humanitarian relief, and treating people with dignity and respect. Jeff Crisp, a former head of policy, development, and evaluation at UNHCR, said it was clearly unsatisfactory and discriminatory for third country nationals who have fled from Ukraine to be held in detention centers in EU states, not least because of the trauma they will have experienced in their efforts to leave Ukraine and find safety elsewhere. He added, they should be released immediately and treated on an equal basis with all others who have been forced to leave Ukraine. It comes after the EU High Commission for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, warned this week that although he had been humbled by the outpouring of support seen by communities welcoming Ukrainian refugees, many minorities, often foreigners who had been studying or working there, had described a very different experience. We also bore witness to the ugly reality that some Black and brown people fleeing Ukraine and other wars and conflicts around the world have not received the same treatment as Ukrainian refugees, he said. They reported disturbing incidents of discrimination, violence, and racism. These acts of discrimination are unacceptable, and we are using our many channels and resources to make sure that all people are protected equally. It's disturbing, but they won't do anything to change it until these detention centers are closed. Mr. Gandhi appealed to countries, in particular those neighboring Ukraine, to continue to allow entry to anyone fleeing the conflict without discrimination on grounds of race, color, descent, national or ethnic origin, and regardless of their immigration status. Some names in the story have been changed. Additional reporting credited here. So I want to end with this part. We need to always make sure that the media does not forget about our stories. And we need to always make sure that once they say that, the situation is done, or there's no racism in this country, or we're accepting everybody in, that we take a harder look at what's really happening on the ground. And some people might be saying, well, it's only a small minority of people, right? It's only 50 or 30 people, right? Think about this. During the transatlantic slave trade, when Black men, women, and children were kidnapped by the Spanish, Portuguese, French, British, Dutch, and also during the Saharan slave trade, when we were captured by the Arabs and the Turks, they didn't come and kidnap hundreds of Black people at a time. You can't control hundreds of people on a slave ship or on a trans-Saharan slave trade. You have to only capture 10, 20, 30 people at a time. And yes, I do see a parallel between slavery and Black imprisonment. So just because one group of people that seems to be small are being marginalized or discriminated against in this situation doesn't matter. Every life is valuable, every life counts, and we need to always put our foot on their necks to let them know that we will not forget about our people, no matter how remote they are. And these brothers in Poland should be free. The brother in Estonia should be allowed to stay with his family. And any other group of black people who are being detained after fleeing this war and getting treated like crap, I hope that they find justice and peace and safety. Thank you for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill. Hit the like button, subscribe, share this video. Peace.